This date might not ring a bell, but it is one of the most tragic days in NASCAR history. It is the day of the first fatal accidents in NASCAR. In Georgia, it was Red Byron who lost control of his machine before it plowed into a crowd of spectators. Over in North Carolina, on the same exact day, Bill Davis was fatally injured after his car rolled multiple times. Today, we're going to take a look into NASCAR's past and dive into these tragic stories that have been lost due to time. Right before we get into the video, make sure you guys subscribe so you never miss a video of NASCAR's history. Anyway, let's get right into the video. How could these NASCAR tragedies happen in 1948, but the first official NASCAR Cup season was 1949? Well, contrary to what you might think, NASCAR's first sanctioned series was actually the Whelen and Modified Tour. Back in 1948, it was known as the NASCAR Modified Division. The series got its name from drivers modifying stock cars in different ways to make their cars go much faster. This is different to what is now the NASCAR Cup Series, the top division of NASCAR, which was originally the strictly stock series. It appeared that the Modified Division would be NASCAR's main focus, as the 1948 season had 52 races. On the other hand, the first strictly stock season only featured 8. It was not uncommon for the Modified Division to race multiple races on the same day in different parts of the United States. This was mainly due to costs for drivers and owners and to get more eyes on the races. A really cool example of this took place on June 20th, 1948, where there were 3 different races held that day. The winners of those races were Fonnie Flock, Bob Flock, and Tim Flock. 3 brothers won on the same day, something that will never be repeated in NASCAR. Bob Flock won at the Columbus Speedway, a high-banked half-mile dirt oval located in Midland, Georgia. The track was only open from 1948 to 1952, and shut down due to a lack of fans. This was in large part due to a tragic and shocking accident that took place in the Modified Division race on July 25, 1948. Jack Smith sat on the pole for the 40-lap race at Columbus Speedway, located in Georgia, but the 2 stars of the show were Red Byron and Fonnie Flock. These 2 were battling it out for the points lead, and every race at this point would be pivotal. Everything was going well for leader Red Byron, who led the majority of the race. That was until just 2 laps to go when Billy Carden tried to make a late pass for the win. Byron blocked the attempt by Carden by going low in turn 3, but as he did this, his right front tire blew. The car headed straight toward a crowd of spectators. Byron tried to spin the car, but it didn't work. He mashed the gas a final time in a last-ditch effort to get the car to spin. Unfortunately, the car went straight into a cattle fence, which was the only thing protecting fans from the fast cars on the track. Eyewitnesses state that the car never even completely went through the fence. The car hit the large fence posts, and they bowed just enough to hit a young boy who was 7 years old on the head. Car and fence debris went flying into the crowd of spectators. There were 3,000 spectators crowded around the track, very close to the fence, just so they could get a glimpse of the action, which made the situation much worse. The 7-year-old boy was Roy Brannon. His parents did not even wait for medical workers or an ambulance, as they put him in their car and rushed him to the hospital. Unfortunately, 24 hours later, the boy passed away. 16 other spectators were injured. There were reports of fractured legs, ribs, pelvises, ankles, and even 1 spectator who had their leg amputated. 7 spectators were admitted to the hospital, while the 9 others were treated and released. Driver Charlie Rush had this to say: "Those huge wooden posts were deep in the ground, with about 5 feet above earth. They were strong enough to slightly straighten Byron's car and keep him from plowing directly into the crowd. It was a very unsafe situation, but we just didn't know back then because it had never happened." Eyewitnesses state that people were just laying everywhere, some minorly injured and some severely injured. I'm sure it was a horrific scene. And we're lucky the car did not penetrate completely through the fence. I mean, what would have happened if it did? Hundreds of spectators in this area were piled on top of each other just to see some racing. This could have been even worse than it was. And who knows, maybe it would have been bad enough for NASCAR to fold completely. And this was devastating for Byron, of course, who couldn't have done anything different. He had to live with this accident for the rest of his life. Byron went on to win the first Modified Division Championship that very year and the Strictly Stock Championship in 1949. But beyond this, there was even another tragic accident on that same date. There was another NASCAR modified race at the Greensboro Fairgrounds. It was the fifth modified race at the track in 1948, with two more on the horizon later in the schedule. The Flock brothers and Red Byron had dominated the track, even dating back to the early days of the National Stock Car Racing Association, a sanctioned stock car series that was created 2 years before NASCAR. But during the race, tragedy struck for the young Bill Davis. Bill "Slick" Davis was running almost a lap behind the leaders and was directly in front of them on the track. He hit the outside dirt embankment, lost control of his vehicle, and started rolling. The leaders behind him tried to avoid his flipping machine, but some were unable to do so. 5 more cars were collected in the accident, with some T-boning Davis as he flipped and came to rest. Some sources even claim that Davis was ejected from the car. He was taken to the Piedmont Hospital immediately, but ultimately never regained consciousness. He was just 24 years old. Now, this is an interesting thought. These were the first 2 tragedies under the NASCAR umbrella, both happening on the same day in 1948. Due to the language of the articles, it sounds like the Columbus Speedway incident happened during the day, and the Greensboro incident happened in the evening. Most sources report that Roy Brannon passed away at the hospital about 24 hours after the accident, meaning he passed away on July 26th. However, sources are not as consistent when it comes to the death of Bill Davis. Speed Sport News reported that Bill survived for 2 days after the accident, meaning Roy was the first one to pass away from a NASCAR accident. However, a Greensboro newspaper written on July 26, 1948, reported that Davis passed away last night, just 4 hours after his accident. So, when discussing the first fatality in NASCAR, there is actually some disagreement and some confusion. But considering an article written in 1948 states that Slick Davis passed away on July 25th, and most sources agree that Roy survived to the next day on the 26th, the first fatality in NASCAR is actually Slick Davis. Sir Roy's accident happened first, but Davis passed away sooner. So you can see why this is a topic of confusion, but I will let you all decide what the first fatality is. The Columbus Speedway closed 4 years after the accident in 1952. The answer from track owners was that it closed due to attendance issues. However, the main contributing factor to this was the tragic incident of Roy Brannon. It seemed like fans could never unsee what they saw that day, and they just never came back. The last NASCAR-sanctioned event at the Greensboro Fairgrounds happened in 1958 after being one of the staple tracks among its divisions. In the words of Georgia Racing History's article, it was a sobering night for NASCAR as a whole. Just a handful of months after the organization was officially born, they had 2 nightmare situations on the same day. Unfortunately, this day would set a precedent for what would be commonplace for the following 2 decades, and even stretch into the 21st century before safety technology could finally rein in the dangers of stock car racing. And that's it for this video. I hope you guys found it interesting, and if you enjoyed, be sure to subscribe and check out some of my other videos for more interesting NASCAR stories and videos. But that's it from me on this one. I hope to see you all in the next one. Peace.